Crota's End versus Vault of Glass versus Crota's End. The comparison between the two has been an ongoing thing ever since Crota's End has been mastered by the general public. Today, I want to talk about why so many people seem to like Vault of Glass more than Crota's End, and what I think needs to happen with regards to the future of raiding to keep it successful and perhaps as successful as the Vault of Glass was from a design standpoint. Now, I can appreciate both raids for what they are. They are both some of the best FPS PvE experiences in gaming in my opinion, and have definitely scratched my raiding itch. The Vault of Glass fit very thematically with the Vex as a race, very technical, methodic, and mechanical. Crota's End fit very well thematically with the Hive as a race, chaotic, relentless, and in your face. Because of these themes and how they inspired the design, it's very difficult to compare the two. Bungie wanted to have each raid feel very different from each other instead of just making them similar, and I can appreciate that. However, I want to try to take a look at just the raids themselves, ignoring themes and looking at gameplay. I think the main issue that people had with Crota's End and why people liked Vault of Glass so much were the mechanics and a sense of mastery along with its pacing. With Vault of Glass, when you knew a fight to its core, it was much easier to one-shot versus something in Crota's End. Things didn't really seem to just go wrong in Vault of Glass like they could in Crota's End, and I'm not talking about the bugs that would happen, I'm talking about the actual fights when they were working. For example, the oracles during Atheon spawned in a very specific order, the same amount of supplicants spawned each time, and alternated sides every time. In Crota's End, if a Boomer Knight doesn't show themselves right away, or the Sword Bearer starts hiding in a spot where people can't shoot him, that can screw up the entire fight for non-skill related reasons. Another thing was with regards to the Relic versus the Sword of Crota. The Relic holder had very important responsibilities, and you couldn't really do any fights without them, yes, but they felt more like a support role compared to the Sword of Crota. The Sword holder on Crota is basically the player, and while it still takes a fair amount of communication on the group's part, the Sword holder does a lot of the work. Compare that to the Relic, which, yes, is basically required for all the fights that it is used in, but it's not like you're shooting a constant laser beam at the boss or anything. Everyone in the group still gets involved. Everyone has a role, everyone is in the action. The next big difference is that Vault of Glass hard mode was at level 30 compared to Crota's End being at level 33. Vault of Glass had more enemies as a result of hard mode, but the amount of major enemies did not vary that much, if at all. Crota's End featured not only more enemies, but more major enemies, and on top of already having players deal 30% less damage and taking more damage, this proved effective in making the raid harder, yes, but not in the way that people wanted. However, the majors aren't a problem in the entire raid, but only a couple of places. The finale of the Abyss section is the main culprit of the too many majors problem. Way too many knights cause players to feel like that they have to resort to having to use certain gear or subclasses, and that should not be the case. There's too much going on already to have 3 major knights rushing you on top of that, and then another set shortly after. The other area where there are too many majors is after Iryut's death. I personally have no issue with all the majors in that fight before her death because of how the fight is designed, but all the majors that spawn after the boss dies is a little much, not to mention all the acolytes that end up spawning. It's not part of the fight at all, and it's just really boring filler. The Vault of Glass did not alter the amount of majors in the hard mode, and the majors that are there, namely the goblins and hobgoblins in Atheon Part 1, feel like they have less health than what is expected, so it just required a little more damage as opposed to a full group effort. Supers felt effective against Vault majors, whereas in Crota's End they barely made a dent. However, this could have to do with the fact that knights are a high tier enemy, whereas goblins and hobgoblins are low and mid tier enemies respectively. Vault of Glass also had a mystique to it, with all the different routes and all those areas to explore, and while those places often had nothing of value there, it made it feel like something bigger was going on. Crota's End was fairly linear and doesn't really have much of a sense of exploration. In fact, you really can't explore that much at all. This has nothing to do with the art design, because both places look fantastic. But with Vault of Glass, you weren't really sure what was going on. There was a mystery around it. It felt like, and still feels like, there's secrets to uncover. Crota's End doesn't really have that mystique to it. You feel like you know where you are and you know why you're there, but there isn't enough exposition to make you feel heroic other than, this guy is bad, go kill him. I realize Vault of Glass also has a complete lack of exposition, but it just felt more mysterious and different. One thing I would like to do soon is go back into the Vault of Glass at level 29 with 300 attack weapons to replicate some of the same conditions in Crota's End. What I remember about Vault of Glass at level 29 during the competition for World First is that Vault of Glass at 29 was incredibly difficult. We may have had some level 28s in there as well, but it was still very difficult. I wonder if Vault of Glass was level 31 instead of level 30, if the hard modes would be viewed as more similar than different, because I think they would be viewed as slightly more similar compared to different to an extent. Crota's End was still a very unique and awesome experience, and I know I'd like to see more stuff like the bridge encounter, which splits people up and requires really heavy communication. While Crota is sort of a one-person show with regards to the sword, I don't think it gets enough credit for being communication heavy, since the sword holder needs to communicate with the rest of the team to bring Crota down. However, I think the fewer mechanics featured in Crota's End is what ended up making people not like it as much as Vault of Glass, but this is because it was built very different thematically, and now you can see why it's so tough to compare them. They were built in a way where it's difficult to compare because they had different objectives. I'd like to see more Atheons though, where if you can master the mechanics and you really know your stuff, you're rewarded with quick kills and efficient runs. Feel free to share your thoughts on Crota's End and Vault of Glass. Which did you like better, and what do you want to see more of in Destiny's future with regards to raiding? I know what I'd like to see, and so I've designed my own raid encounter over the past few days, which I'd like to share with all of you very soon. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.